Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Now, for a book that's called Leaves of Grass, we are paying attention always, obviously, when grass actually gets used in the title of a poem. And so we are now in the Prairie-grass dividing of the Calamus section, and this is one of several what we'll call prairie poems in Leaves of Grass. It really is an important poem of geography. Now, our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, the Talks with Walt playlist, and you've been working with us from the inscriptions up and including to the previous poem. I heard it was charged against me in the Calamus section. Now, our Norton's information for background here will tell us that in 1860, the first line of this Calamus number 25 read, quote, "own for special," end quote, "choice and chary for its love power," end quote, followed taint in line 7. The poem took its present title and form in 1867. Now, we've seen a number of poems referencing the prairie in Leaves of Grass, starting from Palmanock, passage 314, Song of Myself, passage 33-39, For You, O Democracy, our O Fuselage, Song of the Broad Axe, part number 2, Pioneers, O Pioneers, drum taps, it's 7 times referenced. We're gonna see it in the Memories of Lincoln referenced 4 times. In Autumn Rivulets, it's going to be referenced 8 times. And Night on the Prairie, quite literally, the Prairie States and Tan-Faced Prairie Boy all will reference prairie. So we're not going to be shocked by a poem like this. However, we will be shocked at a poem like this for a number of reasons. As we spoke about in our conversations in inscriptions, Whitman was coming to terms with a growing America, geographically growing obviously as well, and what that meant for especially indigenous peoples who were already here. In other words, as this growth starts to happen, especially west across the prairies, we have the fact, it is a fact, that there are already indigenous peoples living there who are, of course, going to be in some ways displaced in any number of ways. Sometimes they will be annihilated or physically restrained and moved somewhere else. We're familiar with this, and the way in which Whitman was struggling with that idea. On the one hand, celebrating the growth of America. On the other hand, obviously deeply concerned about what was happening there. Let's just read this poem now. And by the way, do notice that prairie-grass is a hyphenated word. He likes to play that game, as we've seen already in Leaves of Grass a number of times. The prairie-grass dividing, its special odor breathing. Excuse me. I demand of it the spiritual corresponding. Demand the most copious and close companionships of men. Demand the blades to rise of words, acts, beings. Those of the open atmosphere, coarse, sunlit, fresh, nutritious. Those that go their own gait, erect, stepping with freedom and command, leading, not following. Those with a never-quelled audacity. Those with sweet and lusty flesh, clear of taint. Those who look carelessly in the faces of presidents and governors as to say, "Who are you?" Those of earthborn passion, simple, never constrained, never obedient. Those of inland America. Now, it is an interesting thing that he will finish this poem with the word America. I told you guys, it doesn't, ironically, America's greatest poet doesn't actually use the word America very often. Now, he'll often reference the states or these states, but the actual word America, go back to our poem from Inscriptions, I Hear America Singing, and I'll comment on that at length, that the word America is almost like a sacred word. It's almost like a mantra to him that is going to be so sacred that he's not going to say it very often. So the fact that this poem will end with that word is significant. Notice he will begin with the prairie grass, obviously the grass of Kansas, Nebraska. We'll think later, of course, of that being wheat. Now, of course, in the time that he's writing, a lot of this grass is just the natural grass that grows out on the plains. Of course, the buffalo grasses, we're familiar with it out here in Wyoming. The prairie grass, notice he begins with dividing. Now notice, the great unifier, he doesn't use the word unifying, he rather uses the word dividing. And then he'll begin to talk about it. Its special odor, breathing, right? That is to say, where you have all the senses solicited in Leaves of Grass all the time, right? And then watch the use of the word demand at least 3 times here. I demand of it the spiritual corresponding. That's a key word in Leaves of Grass, this idea of spirituality, right? Demand the most Copious and close companionship, see all those C's, of men, right? That is to say, adhesiveness, as we have heard in the Calamus section. So we've got this spiritual versus this physical tension that's happening here. Demand the blades, of course we're talking about the grass here, right? To rise of words, acts, beings, notice our threes, right? Those, and then we're going to have the repetition of the word those 7 times, right? Those of the open atmosphere. That is to say, Whitman is going to celebrate those who live out in the West, in the prairies, and on the open plains, that they have somehow, they've grown up in the open air, as he'll call it in Song of the Open Road, right? The open atmosphere. The word coarse here simply means simple, okay? It doesn't mean disgusting, as we'll come to use the word later. Sunlit obviously means spending lots and lots of time out of doors. Fresh as opposed to stale. And then nutritious, and this is going to be one of those things, I mean, just do that history on your own, of starting with Whitman and then later with Kellogg, and the idea that Americans, by definition, are more healthy because they're more nutritious. They're more conscious of their nutrition, and so we're going to play this game here with nutritious. Those that, and now he's going to begin to talk more specifically about some of these characteristics of people who will live out here, although he'll call it America. That is to say, for him, Leaves of Grass is, of course, America, but so are these prairie states, and so he'll begin by saying those that go their own gait. Now we'll think about Thoreau marching to the beat of one's own drummer, right? And then the use of the word erect, that is to say, he's always talking in Leaves of Grass about proper posture. It's interesting. Stepping with freedom and command. Notice we go from demand to command. Leading, not following. By the way, think of that word erect as it got used in Song of Myself, passage 4, and then think about the idea of leading, not following. In other words, for Whitman, he saw America from the very beginning as a leader on the world stage, which is a pretty remarkable thing to see because, of course, at the time, America couldn't have been considered that kind of a leader in any stretch of the imagination. Somehow Whitman saw that coming, right? Those with a never quelled audacity. Now, this will be Whitman arguing that Americans have that never quit, can-do kind of attitude, and he uses the word audacity. It's an interesting word for him to use. To be audacious, of course, means that you are somewhat defiant, iconoclastic, we might say Whitman-esque, right, to say it that way. Notice, we're going to say it, audacity, those with sweet and lusty flesh. We've heard this before. Clear of taint, we've heard that before. We're going to go back to this idea when we hit Song of the Open Road, and the idea that whoever travels with me must be clear of any kinds of taint, that is to say, healthy in every way. And then he'll say it, those who look carelessly in the faces of presidents and governors as if to say, who are you? Well, here it is, right? Obviously, the West is iconoclastic for him. That notion of being defiant in every way. Think about earlier poems where presidents have been mentioned, and the idea that we've got all of these different kinds of presidents that Whitman will have been a part of as he was in fact publishing Leaves of Grass. And notice what Whitman says. The people tell the president what it is they want. It isn't the inverse. And for Whitman, that's a huge point of democracy, as we've said in our studies in the inscriptions poems. Notice, those of earth-born passion. We're back to this idea of course again, right? Earth-born passion. And then he'll use the word simple. And then he'll use this idea of never constrained, never obedient. That is to say, don't tell me what to do. Now, if you'll watch my lectures on learnstrong.net about Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, I will begin that lecture by saying that fundamental to understanding Americans is, don't tell me what to do. Notice, Declaration of Independence, not the query of independence, not the, gee, let's think about this and see if this makes sense to us of independence. None of that. Notice here it is never constrained. That is to say, we're going to resurrect this question of, is there a time when Americans have been at fault because they haven't been able to constrain their desires, their lust, for example, for land or whatever. Never obedient is interesting use of that word as well, right? That is to say, defiant, he will obviously predict in some ways Think about this. He will predict in some ways as he's writing this the future of great American tension. Why? Because if we're never obedient, if we're never constrained, then what is it that keeps us all together? What is the social cohesivity that keeps us all together so that we can all at least be all one nation if we're never obedient? So there's a tension here that Whitman's playing around with as he finally finishes those of, and then he'll call it Inland America. Why? I think what Whitman was doing, and I think, this is probably where Emerson had his problems sometimes with Whitman, he was celebrating the fact that Middle America is as much America as what we will see, of course, on the Eastern Seaboard. That is to say, that's really America. For most Americans, New York, Boston is America. And then what's happening out here in these prairie lands, this is kind of unknown territory. For Whitman, however, it was a mark of what America actually ultimately will in fact be. And of course, this begs the question, well, what about the existence of all of the indigenous animals that were here? We think, of course, the bison and the buffalo. What about the native peoples that are obviously here, that it will be displaced and dislodged? Clearly, those kinds of concerns for us today make a poem like this deeply disturbing and a controversial poem, no question. Well, at 2A, what is the message here? Obviously, America is a complicated poem or a complicated song. At 2B, notice the repetitions of demand and those, as we have seen so many times before. At 3A, I'm going to throw out the name that we love so much in 303 and has to be mentioned, I think, with reading a poem like this, the great Willa Cather. Think about our study of My Antonia as well as O Pioneers, and the celebration of the heartland of America, that middle of America. And yet Cather is one of those great writers that reminds us we shouldn't idealize or romanticize those individuals who grew up out in that very difficult part of America. And obviously we have to think about Mark Twain and the ways in which he as well will speak about a different kind of America, this inland America as Whitman will call it. Finally, at 3B, how are you going to own a poem like this? I'll ask you this question. What part of America do you love best? As in geographically. Is it in fact the West? I mean, I realize that you guys are kind of a product of this, although not all of us, because some of us are displaced from other parts of either the world or from America. And then, I got to ask this question because I think this poem demands it. How do you balance, find some kind of equilibrium between, on the one hand, the celebration of this great, amazing country, America, and the pride that we must take in our country, and of course, the shame that comes along with recognitions that, yeah, it is true that we were unconstrained often in our quest for land or for minerals or whatever, displacing large amounts of animal species and, of course, human beings. And how do you deal with that? How do you celebrate America on the one hand and yet deal justly with the fact that America has a history of injustice? Can you, in fact, wrap your brain around both of those? I think there is no greater poet to help us do that than the great Walt Whitman. Thank you.